So, welcome for those of you that are in Virginia. I hope everyone is staying safe and enjoying the snow. If you're that kind of person, we do have a little bit of snow in Fredericksburg. It's basically just an inch or two, just enough to be annoying, but still enough to be pretty if you're the kind of person that wants to sit in the window and look out and see it. But my name is Philip Duggins. I'm with the Alumni Engagement Office here at Mary Washington, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. We are excited to host a sizable audience of over 200 for tonight's presentation, which includes alumni, students, parents, and friends from across the country and beyond. As with past lectures, there will be time after the presentation for our guests to answer any questions you might have. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Feel free to click on that icon and you can submit your questions there. Or if you see a question that is of interest to you, click on that and it will, the more votes that it gets, the higher it will come up on the list and be more likely to be answered. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Daniel Milliken, class of 2020. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to introduce a man I could say probably is one of the reasons why I am where I am today. I met Dr. Griffith when I started in the biology department back when I started going to school again in 2018. I went back to school later in my life. I was a veteran, so I was using my time after the Army to go back and get my degree. And Dr. Griffith took me under his wing and showed me the ropes. We worked together, measuring trees and getting all the data specifically for my undergrad research project. Wow, it's a lot harder to do this live with people now that this is the first time I've ever done it. I mean, what can I say? He was there for me. He gave me like the confidence. He showed me the ropes. He helped me get to be the person I am in the field that I am currently. I work with the USDA dealing with plants. And if it wasn't for him, I probably would not be in this position. I'm thankful for everything Dr. Griffith has taught me over those years, and I still try to utilize it to the best of my ability moving forward. So it is an honor to introduce Dr. Alan Griffith tonight, and I hope you all enjoy this presentation. Dr. Griffith.
Dan, thanks a lot. I guess I'm ready to share my screen here. All righty, so everyone should now see the first slide of my screen. Dan, thanks a lot for that introduction. I really appreciate it. I will echo what Philip said. I hope everybody's if you're around here, you're snuggled in someplace, and that you're out of the cold, out of the snow, and able to enjoy the bits of stuff that I have to talk about this evening. When I was first approached by Philip to do this, number one, I'm just honored and happy to do this for everyone today. I called it at first my tree walk to Mary talks, because folks have known me. Alumni had known me because I do these tree talks in the summer. And now I've been asked to kind of broaden that a little bit and talk a bit more about the biodiversity on UMW campus. And I'm going to use images, talk about tools, and finally talk about the impacts of biodiversity on UMW's campus. Depending on where you are in life, you probably had this kind of conversation at some point with either your child or a grandchild even. They know stuff that older folks don't necessarily know. What is biodiversity, you say? And your child, who knows so much more than you do, says it's the variety of living organisms at all levels, individuals, populations, and communities. And so that's what I want to talk about tonight. But I want to talk about that biological diversity mostly on UMW's campus. In outline this evening, first I want to talk a bit about campus living resources. I'm going to use a series of images that will help bring you all back onto campus if you've not been on campus for a while. We're going to talk then about biodiversity tools. Part of that is the maps that I have created to help aid the folks that manage trees and other living resources on campus. And then finally, I'm going to talk a bit about urban diversity, which is where we are. We're basically in an urban environment. And I want to make clear why it is that this diversity that surrounds us on campus is important for a couple different reasons. So first, I'm going to talk about campus living resources. I hope as I do this, I capture some of your favorite trees and maybe your favorite places on campus. And so when I look at campus, I don't look at the buildings directly. I look at these buildings through a lens of the plants that surround them, like Norm Schaefer did with his picture of GW Hall. Like you, I think, when I look at campus, I don't just see Double Drive, right? When I look at this image that I took last summer, yes, I see the bricks, the red bricks that are so common around campus, but what else do I see? I see, oh, that tree on the left-hand side, that's an eastern red cedar. What about these huge trees that go down the right-hand side of Double Drive? Well, those are a series of willow oaks that were planted around 1964. That taller tree in the background there, you can't see the base of it, that's a white pine. Those nicely trimmed large shrubs that go down the center of Double Drive, those are Nellie Stevens hollies. They're pretty common on campus. They trim and they shape very nicely. And so landscape folks really like Nellie Stevens hollies. I'll just pause here and I'm going to let you all think, where is this? I think everyone knows this image of campus from the fall, not too late in the fall, right? So the street there you see, that's College Avenue. And if you, on the right-hand side image, what you can't see back in the back is where the theater is, right? And so these are that long line of sugar maples that lined all the way from the current Jepson Hall down almost to Seekobeck, but not quite all the way down to Seekobeck. These trees, they kind of inspire me whenever it gets to this time of year in the fall and these sugar maples start turning their yellows and their oranges and their reds. Every time I walk to my car in the evening, I take a different shot of them. And sometimes I try to get a little weird just because I feel like taking a different shot of these lovely trees. Now, here's a building that if you're a more recent graduate, you might not recognize. But if you're an older graduate, you will recognize this as Chandler Hall. And I'm going to come back to the trees that are surrounding it in just a second. Now, Chandler Hall was torn down several years ago, and it was replaced by what the UC, the University Center, right? And so everyone, if you've been on campus recently, recognizes that. Again, yes, we see the buildings. This is Chandler Hall, Cedric Rucker UC, the University Center. And I point to that tree, that really tall tree on the left-hand side, and I say, what's that? Well, it's that same tree, right? The trees are still there. The building has been torn down. A new building is put up, and we still have these magnificent old silver lindens. There's 2 silver lindens there, just to the left of Cedric Rucker UC. If I go back over here on the left-hand side, that was a red maple. That's no longer there. Um, there's a new, relatively small bush here, and then there's a newer, I think it's a red maple back in there. Here's a tree that I hope everyone recognizes to give you the place on campus. This is near Randolph Mason. Um, Mason is directly behind this tree, and then Randolph would be off to the right of this tree. It's right along Campus Walk. And I wish you could all tell me that you recognize this. This is a mulberry tree. It's probably a white mulberry tree. When I describe this, I call this the gnarled old tree along Campus Walk because that's what it is. It's a gnarled old tree. That's this wonderful tree that we just keep alive as long as we can possibly keep it alive. I know this is a tree that everyone recognizes, right? So the building here that it's next to, that is Monroe Hall. You can see the sign from Monroe Hall right here. Here's another perspective on that same tree. Walking from Lee Hall toward Monroe on College Walk. That tree is a southern magnolia. As far as I know, it is the largest southern magnolia on campus and probably one of the largest trees on campus if you look at it in both in a couple of different ways that we look at tree size. I also do want to, though, point out that yes, we have magnificent trees on campus, like this southern magnolia, but don't ever forget. So here's a couple trees. You can see one in the front. There's another one in the back. That's a flowering dogwood, and there are flowering dogwoods all over campus. And certainly when they're blooming, they're an important part of the beauty that trees bring to campus here at the University of Mary Washington. This tree might be a little hidden. This tree is on the backside of Willard Hall. And so off to the right of both these photographs is Monroe Hall. And so this tree, here's a full shot of this tree. That's a ginkgo biloba. It's a ginkgo tree. There are a couple of ginkgo trees on campus. This is the largest, clearly the largest ginkgo tree on campus. It's an old tree. Again, to point out other things that are close by. If you're familiar with this place, on the backside of Willard, you're also familiar with this small cusp of trees to the left of the ginkgo. And there are two different kinds of plants in there. There's some crepe myrtles in there. I think the taller plant right there is a crepe myrtle. And then there are a bunch of sweet bay magnolias, a smaller species of magnolia than the southern magnolia. And there are about 5 of those really pretty sweet bay magnolias in a group of trees off here to the left. Again, if you graduated a long time ago, you might not recognize this building. This is the Jepson Science Center. It was built in 1996. This is the campus walk side of really the main entrance of Jepson Science Center. And this picture, taken by Norm Schaefer, has 2, I think, important trees on it. The one you first see, I think, are the trees with these blooms, these very pretty early season, early spring blooms. Those are Kwanzaa cherries. They're planted because they grow pretty quickly. They have nice foliage and they have just gorgeous early spring flowers. And then there are these 2 American hollies that sit on either side of the portico for Jepson Science Center. Before I get past these pictures of trees that you might recognize from campus, I do want to point a couple of the newer components that are both trees and more broadly speaking, biological diversity. We now have on the backside of Farmer Hall a Zen garden or a contemplative garden. this contemplative garden, it's really neatly kept. It's kept in Japanese gardening style. Many of these small trees are different um, types of Japanese maples. Um, there is a pecan tree sitting right there that's much older than these other trees that were planted. And this is maintained by a group of students and faculty um, on campus, and they're all housed in Farmer Hall. So if you haven't seen the Zen Garden yet, next time you're on campus, go to Farmer Hall, walk around the backhand side, and it's a really nice place to visit. Probably about 5 years old now, we have our first pollinator garden. I think it was the first pollinator garden planted. This pollinator garden is kind of on the backside of Gorick and Anderson Center. If you look at the right-hand photograph here, this is the walking bridge that goes from Anderson Center right here across over Route 1 to the other side where the dormitories are. So that's where this pollinator garden was planted. The ground was turned up and a great variety of different kinds of pollinator loving plants were planted here. And you can see I borrowed this photograph of this collage of plants, all that grow in the pollinator garden here behind Golick and Anderson Center. In the middle of the summer and spring, this is a great place to go to see all kinds of flowering plants and the insects that visit them. So I guess I want to end up this part of my talk to make clear why I think this is important, right? Or what I see, right? Many people first and foremost see the buildings, right? They see this neo-Georgian architecture, which some people really love. But what I see here and there and everywhere is not just the structures like the bell tower, but I see all the plants that are surrounding the bell tower. I see this purple weeping. I just forgot what kind of tree this is that is right beside the library and all the other plantings that are done in different parts of campus. This is another smaller pollinator garden that's between the Science Center and the Workout Center on campus. I hope you've gotten to see some trees that you really enjoy, some trees that you recognize, and I hope that partly what this does is it brings your head back into hopefully the reason you're here for this talk is that you really love the trees and the biological diversity of plants on our campus. Let me turn now. So I call this biodiversity tools. This is really about, it's much about the people that are really important that make biological diversity what it is on campus. And my part in this has become creating dynamic maps that I can share with managers and hopefully share with folks outside of the University of Mary Washington to let them know a bit of what are the different kinds of plants that grow on our campus. I'll just pause here. When I started this project back in 2016, one of the things I thought was that if we could just bottle the beauty of this campus, right, and we could give these bottles that folks would just flock to the University of Mary Washington. I mean, folks already flock to the University of Mary Washington, but I think if we could just show this beauty in a consistent kind of way, that even more people would say, yes, this is going to be my forever home for a university where I want to spend at least 4 years of my life, right? And so I embarked on this long-term project that ends up with creating maps. Now, before I talk about stuff that I do here, I want to just make clear that the folks that make our campus gorgeous are the folks in UMW's landscape and grounds, right? I will point out two specific people. On the left-hand side here, this is Joni Wilson. Joni Wilson is a retired director of landscape and grounds. She worked here for many, many years, and she was dedicated to her core to making this campus as beautiful as it possibly is. And I credit her for a lot of what you see on campus today. Now, Joni retired a couple years ago. When Joni retired, she wasn't replaced, but the new director of landscape and grounds is Holly Chichester Morby. So on the left-hand side here, the lady with the blue-handled shovel, that is Holly. And one of her staff. This shows Holly and one of her staff probably on an Arbor Day planting a tree right beside Virginia Hall. And so without the dedication of landscape and ground staff and these just amazing folks that lead them, Joni Wilson and Holly Chichester Morby, our grounds would not look the way they look today and be as gorgeous as we know they are and we enjoy. These grounds are also important because of a commitment by University of Mary Washington as a whole, right? And so even our Eagle plants trees, right? People come together at different times of year and they plant trees on the campus of the University of Mary Washington. I include this image because it shows just the variety of folks that take part in planting trees on campus. Of course, Troy Pano is on the left-hand side here. Through the middle there, there's Holly Chichester Morby right there in the middle. A couple of folks from the community are back in the back. This gentleman is staff. This person's name is Sean Morris. He was for about 3 or 4 years our first sustainability coordinator. So he's helping out. This is faculty. And then, of course, Chief Hall was here that day helping plant these trees on Arbor Day. And so people from across the community come together to make the diversity on campus that we love so much. Because of this, University of Mary Washington has gained a couple really important recognitions. All right, folks from outside recognize that we have a gorgeous campus and that we manage and maintain an important group of trees as part of our biological diversity on campus. And so we have been asked to join Tree Campus Higher Education. It is a program by the Arbor Day Foundation. Much of this is supported by the sustainability staff here at the University of Mary Washington. To become part of Tree Campus Higher Education, we had to meet 5 standards. Number 1, we had to have a campus tree advisory committee. Number 2, we had to have a campus tree care plan. Number 3, had to have a campus tree programming with specific expenditures for taking care of trees and planting trees. We have to observe Arbor Day. We do that every year. And finally, we have to support service learning projects that are around maintaining trees, planting trees, and also helping manage other components of biological diversity on campus. And so we've been part of Tree Campus Higher Education for 4 or 5 years now, and it might be longer than that. This is a couple images of an Arbor Day planting. One of the things that allows us to be part of Tree Campus Higher Education. So there's Troy Pano. I'm back in the back there. We've got a combination of faculty, staff, and students this planting. This planting is right below Arrington Hall and the Hurley Convergence Center. There's a place there where there's riprap. So this rock here is riprap where runoff runs down through there. And Holly pulled together I believe there were 12 river birches. And so on either side of this rocky area, we planted these 12 river birches in groups of 3 so that they grow to be a multi-stemmed river birch. Why choose river birches? This is kind of the perfect place for a river birch to be, right? They don't mind having their roots wet. In fact, they enjoy having their roots wet. And so putting these kinds of trees along this raceway-like thing is a sensible thing to do. That's one of the things that Holly does for us. She makes good decisions about where to plant trees that we plant. I chose this image. So this is ball circle you're looking at. There is the UC Center, the C. J. Crocker UC Center, right-hand side. Ball Hall is here. There are those 2 silver lindens that we saw before. This is an image or snapshot of just the evolution of what has to happen with biological diversity on a campus. This bare spot here was a fairly large red maple, an old red maple that was sitting in front of, so Virginia Hall is behind this picture. And so this tree finally died. This was a tough place for trees to live because Ball Circle gets so much traffic, right? And so that was taken down, but it was replaced by another tree. Holly's current policy is that if 1 tree comes down, 2 trees get planted in its place. I include these 2 images, and I call it "Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood." In the process of managing biological diversity on campus, some things happen that are temporarily kind of ugly. And people see this and they have negative reactions because they don't really understand what's going on. The image that you see there was taken from the bridge that goes between Palmieri Square and Seekebeck. In the wooded area below there, there's the stream that goes through that wooded area. And so a couple of years ago, this area got cleaned out and people were up in arms because there was a bunch of vegetation that was taken out here. But all that vegetation was invasive species, which have a negative impact on biological diversity. And so while in the short run, it doesn't look that nice, in the longer run, doing this kind of cleaning out is good for biological diversity. The other thing that happened here more recently is there was a tree of heaven. There was a huge tree of heaven right there, which is an invasive tree. And so more recently, Holly took that invasive tree out of there so that other native trees can be planted or can grow in that place. Okay. Part of the work that I do now to support biological diversity on campus is I make maps. All right. So let me just pull up one of these maps. So this is a website that I own with another faculty member. And on this website, I host a couple maps that I make. So and I can share these URLs with folks if you want them. I keep a couple different maps on here. So there I keep a map of what I call heritage trees and non-heritage trees. I have a map behind this link that is all the trees on Brompton's property. And I also have a map of all the trees out at Belmont Estates. Let me see if I can find. Here we go. All right. I'm going to make a larger map. Now zoom out there. So these maps that I make are dynamic maps. They're GIS-based maps. And so here I zoom out, and that oddly shaped polygon there, that's the main part of campus. And over here is the sports complex. And so you see a mass of green there because those are icons that represent individual trees. So let me zoom in a little bit. And when I zoom in a little bit, so let me get you oriented someplace here. Okay, here's Ball Circle. Right? And on this map is the location of every current tree almost every current tree around Ball Circle, around Lee Hall, and in different places around the Cedric Rucker University Center. And when you click on one of these, what I love about these kinds of dynamic maps is you can uncover information about each of these trees in that place. It tells you where they are. It tells you, I do have botanical names. Somehow I messed that up today, and the botanical name is not showing up. It tells you the common name. That tree right there is a star magnolia, the family that's in, and a bit more information, including size information. So let me talk a bit more about this size information. Back in 2016, I partnered with Joni Wilson. There's Joni on the right-hand side. This young woman, her name is Elizabeth Pena, and that's me. 2016, I partnered with Joni because Joni wanted maps of trees on campus. And I was in a position where I say, well, I can help you do that. And so I helped her do that. And we started this heritage tree mapping project, and it continues on today, actually. Joni brought an amazing amount of information to this partnership that we had. Before I even started making maps of trees, she had these amazing, detailed, hand-drawn maps of every building on campus and all of the trees and shrubs that surrounded them. And they were labeled and they were ID'd, and she had information about trees that had been removed recently. So, for example, this is in the middle here is Willard Hall, right? She gave numbers to these locations. And so this is what she called Zone 36 on campus. And then around here, for example, let's see, where do I want to? So this is, I just got lost in, okay, Willard. There's the ginkgo that we saw a picture of a little bit ago. Off to the side of the ginkgo, one of the few horse chestnuts that are on campus. And here is this little grove of sweet bay magnolias that I pictured, and there's that crepe myrtle that we saw there also. And so I could actually use these maps that Joni had already made as a starting point for both naming plants and locating them on maps that have latitude and longitudes connected to them. Just another example, this is her map of what she called Zone 32, which is Ball Circle. I also kept notes on these things as we worked through this, making the dynamic maps that are now shareable online. A big part of what I was interested in doing with trees on campus was measuring them, right? How big are these trees on campus beyond what are their species? And so let me talk a bit about the tools that we use to measure different parts of the size of trees. This image, what is in my hand there, that's called a clinometer. I'll talk about it in just a second. This orange object in the middle, that's actually a kind of measuring tape. It's called a DBH tape, which is short for diameter breast height tape. And this is just a regular meter tape. One of the things that you want to know about the size of a tree is how tall is it, right? Now you can use some not too complex, but tedious trigonometry to calculate the height of the tree. That's too hard. And so this is where a clinometer comes in. This object, it allows you to do this. So as long as I know how far I am back from a tree, right? This is me. This is the tree. If I sight up to the top of the tree, that clinometer, in a very simple ways, tells me how tall the tree is above my eye level. And then I can also sight down to the bottom of the tree, and that tells me how tall the tree is between my eye and the ground. Add those two things together, and you have the total height of the tree. And so we did that at some point with every tree on campus. That data is included in the database that I have available to the public. Another important piece of information for size is called the diameter breast height. for short, DBH. There's a standard breast height here in the United States for all foresters. It's about 4.3 feet above the ground, right? And then you use this DBH tape. What this DBH tape does is this. Now, remember, I said we want to measure the diameter. So we want to measure the distance through the middle of the tree. Well, you can't do that, at least not easily. And so this tape, you string it around the circumference, and the tape is scaled so that you directly know what the diameter is based upon the calculation from the circumference. So I don't have to do any math. It just tells me what the diameter is when I run the tape all the way around the outside. So this is myself and Elizabeth Pena back in 2018 measuring the Brompton oak. We also want to know crown spread, how much of the area of the ground is covered by the crown or all the leaves. And so basically, this is a fairly simple thing to do. You take that meter tape and you run the meter tape in one direction underneath the crown, in the other direction underneath the crown, and then you take the averages of those two things and you get the average crown spread, right? That's what we did. Specifically what we did was we ran a diameter in the east-west direction, and we ran another diameter in the north-south direction. And so that gave us a sense of how big the crown spread was for each of the trees on campus. All of that data then goes into this Heritage Tree GIS database. We saw some of those numbers before, so I won't go back to them again, so I can move forward and talk about a couple more things here. Right, so why is all this important? I know that you're saying this is important because, you know what, this campus is just a gorgeous campus, right? It's because the living things from this campus is that we love it so much. But I can add more to that, right? As a biologist, as an ecologist. And so I'd like to talk just a little bit about urban biodiversity and why urban biodiversity is so very important, beyond the fact that we think it's gorgeous, right? A visual once again. So if you're not used to, this is an aerial photograph of the Fredericksburg area. Let me orient you to and if you're not used to seeing aerial photographs, let me orient you. So I'm going to run my cursor. That's the east side of campus. That's the west side of campus going up there. All right, we've got residential area here, residential area down along Sunken Road, and here's downtown Fredericksburg, right? What I want you to see here is the dark green, right? Again, if you're not used to seeing aerial photographs, in a photograph like this, dark green is forest. So what we most have been talking about so far is the trees that are not in forests on campus. But when you look at our campus, from eagle's eye view, what you see is a large percentage of the area of our campus is covered by trees. I call them woodlots, right? I don't have a percentage measured actually, but it's probably somewhere between 30 and 40% of all the area on campus. And so the amount of trees on campus is significant. And that for me translates to there's a lot of biological diversity on campus. But why is biodiversity important, right? 2012, Cardinal and a long list of co-authors wrote a paper that reviewed what we know about what biological diversity does in ecosystems, right? So they started here and said, let's look at biological diversity. When you have a group of plants and animals together, what do? They create ecosystems, and ecosystems have functions. They have functions like of oxygen production. They have functions like sequestering carbon through photosynthesis. And so those functions by themselves are important. But wait, do people really care about that? Some do, some don't. So we can also say that these ecosystem functions also support ecosystem services. And that's what we get, humans get from ecosystem functions. Things like cleaner water, because ecosystems do these functions that they do. We get food from ecosystems because of the functions that they do. And so these services turn and they positively impact people. But wait, people are causing climate change. Climate change can have a negative impact on biological diversity. Climate change can have a negative impact on ecosystems. And so we need to understand that if we manage and maintain biological diversity, we will manage and maintain ecosystem functions, and those ecosystem functions support the services that we get directly from ecosystems. Here's some examples of urban biodiversity and the services that come from it. So here's diversity. Diversity supports functions. Ecosystems in urban areas act as air filtration. The plants filter out particulate matter. Plants and ecosystems in urban areas mediate climate on relatively small areas. They cool things down. You know, when you walk to the middle of a woods in an urban area, it's quiet there. And so biodiversity leads to noise reduction. Biodiversity leads to less water runoff from rains, which is really important. It turns out that ecosystems also partly function to decrease the amount of function going into sewage systems, or amount of sewage going into sewage systems. And finally, there are lots of recreational and cultural values that we get from biodiversity in general, and specifically from the ecosystems that are in the urban spaces in which we live. Dan is a person that helped me measure some of this here on the campus of University of Mary Washington, right? And so one of the things that he did was he took my data sets and he ran them through something called iTree, and he calculated the percentages by counts, the percentage of different types of trees we have on campus. Really quickly, the largest number of trees we have on campus are eastern red cedars. The next biggest number, flowering dogwoods. The next biggest number is red maples. And then there are lots with a bunch of trees that come in really small percentages, right? But we know the kinds of trees are on campus. What do these trees actually do? This same iTree program allowed us to calculate how much carbon is sequestered. So this y-axis here on the left-hand side is carbon sequestration, the amount of carbon that's taken up by plants, specifically the trees that grow on our campus, not in woodlots. And so you can see the eastern red cedars altogether, they sequester more than 4,000 pounds of carbon every year. So that's just one of trees. And in total, this totals to somewhere between 12 and 14 tons of carbon sequestered every year. And finally, so I'll skip past this one. And what I want to talk about is this. Fairly recently, 2005, Van Hoffen and other authors wanted to understand what kinds of emotions do people feel when they see biological diversity. And through having people visit natural areas, as well as showing them pictures of natural areas, they measured a couple of things, right? So they got people to say, they had some measure perceived naturalness. Perceived naturalness is connected to biological diversity, right? The more biological diversity, the more people perceive an area as being natural. And then they measured a couple of other things. They measured people's emotions connected to naturalness, and they measured people's place attachment measured to naturalness. And both of those things, so these are mean values of both of those things. The blue is emotions, and the red is place attachment. And so as people perceive greater naturalness in the area, they have more positive emotions. As people perceive areas that have more naturalness, they feel more attached to that place. And that's that thing that I think we all feel partly about the University of Mary Washington when we think about the plants that are on University of Mary Washington, right? So I end with a couple of snapshots here of what we've seen before of just the loveliness of the University of Mary Washington. I do have a couple acknowledgments. Of course, I acknowledge Joni Wilson, retired Director of Landscape and Grounds, Holly Chichester Morby, the current Director of Landscape and Grounds. I could not do what I do without them having already done what they do for campus. Thank you, Dan, for the introduction. Thank you, Dan, for all the work that you did to the over 3 years' time when you're here at University of Mary Washington. Thanks to Norm Schaefer. I used quite a few of his photographs throughout this presentation. I have not listed all of the undergraduates that has worked in this project with me. I've probably supported 15 to 20 students over the last 6 or so years on this project. And so that's all I have. And I think this is where we turn to questions.
Yep. So yeah, at this point we'll start taking some questions. And once again, please submit your questions by going to the bottom of the screen. You'll see a Q&A icon, and you can click on that, and that'll give you an opportunity to submit your questions there. So first of all, I will say you mentioned her several times, but Holly Chester Morby is actually on with us this evening, and so there are a couple of things that she mentioned, and one, she says she's not going to answer the questions for you, but then she says that the ginkgo at Willard is gone now.
Is it? Okay.
And then she also said that this is actually our 9th year as a tree campus.
Thank you.
So, and then the first question we've got is, you mentioned that a large invasive non-native tree was removed recently to allow for the planting of native trees. Are there other non-native trees on campus, and if so, will those be removed as well?
Yeah, so Holly has a good ongoing campaign of removing invasive species. I think that spot that is below Woodard and Willard is a good example where there was a large area. I don't know how many square feet that was, but there was a large area that was mostly English ivy. And so part of Holly's campaign was just to go in there and remove all that English ivy that was up toward the lawn and down in the woods there. And there are other places. Oftentimes we have service projects, or Holly pulls together students for service projects where other invasive plants. The things that are focused on are English ivy, Japanese honeysuckle, tree of heaven, and I'm forgetting the very pretty small tree with pink flowers. It's jumping out. But anyway, yes, there ongoing work to remove invasive species from campus.
And then Sandy Smallwood asked, is the tree walk offered to the community? Would be a great activity for alumni at this year's reunion weekend. And
I think I've already been invited to come back, and I think I have at least 2 time slots reunion weekend to do tree walks.
Absolutely. Yep. So we're excited to have that as part of our alumni college sessions at reunion weekend. So we're excited about that. Then Sylvia Woodcock asked, are there still Kwanzaa cherry trees on Campus Walk?
Campus Walk. There are Kwanzaa cherry trees are around the front of Jepson Science Center. I'm in my head, I'm going back across Campus Walk. I am not picturing any other Kwanzaa cherries along, in my head, I'm not picturing any other Kwanzaa cherries along Campus Walk.
Next question is, what mapping software did you use? Is it something used at other campuses, botanical gardens, etc.?
Yeah, so I use we have a license here on campus for what's called ArcGIS. They're Esri products. That's the name of the big corporation. I use what's called ArcGIS and a couple other connected software to ArcGIS. Um, it is that is a piece of software. It's very expensive. A lot of universities and colleges do use it. There, but I also have learned how to use GIS software that is free to use. And so my plans for the future when I leave here is that I would love to offer to other folks free versions of GIS software that so they could do similar kinds of things to this.
Okay. And then Chuck is asking, I've seen deer on campus. What other animals live there?
Goodness, deer, squirrels. Um, if you go to the wrong place, you'll fall into um, uh, uh, the chuck holes. Goodness gracious. I think other large
I know
any other
that
thing that you find in your backyard, basically. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a coyote on campus. That would be a question um that would be interesting to know.
and there's actually a comment that says they've seen foxes also. And I can say
Yeah.
my office being here in the Alumni Center, right across from Brompton, we see a lot of foxes kind of over on the Brompton property as well. So.
Yeah, and I mean, that closely connects to more wooded areas, so it makes sense that foxes would be over there. When you look at that one woodlot on the north side of campus that goes all the way from Arrington Hall across Sunken Road, and it is continuous pretty much all the way over to the amphitheater and beyond. That's a really big piece of woods. And animals can live in that area and seldom meet people. That's very cool.
So Holly actually makes a comment here. Several Kwanzaa and Yoshino cherries were planted over the last 2 years, and also autumnal is cherries too on Campus Walk and by Combs Hall. And then I can't say that, but something about Antumnalis cherries, something like that, instead of autumnal, which is what I said. But so yeah, so thank you for that information, Holly. Other questions, please, if anyone has. Oh, here's one. What other forestry ecological inventory projects are going on campus?
So I am in the process of updating the database. I am capturing trees that have fallen or died or been taken down over the last 5 years, and I'm adding trees that have been planted since then. So that's one of my ongoing projects. One of the projects that Dan helped me start out that I haven't gotten too far with is trying to get an estimate of the biological diversity in the woodlots. So not the trees that are managed on campus, but the trees and the plants that are in woodlots. That's a big project that I kind of pick away here and there. And I also incorporate that into some of my classes. And so I've got a couple classes where they learn plant inventory kinds of tools and techniques. And so we go out into the woodlots to actually collect data when we do that. Those are the major ones.
Okay, next question. How much of the plants on campus are native?
I don't have a good, straightforward answer to that. I can tell you this is that because of the ongoing efforts to get rid of invasive plants on campus, that means that as you get rid of invasive plants, that increases the percentage of native plants on campus. And Holly also keeps forefront and in mind that when she's planting new trees, that wherever possible, native trees are planted.
Okay. Next question. Given that the area has been active since the Civil War, how many trees besides the Brompton oak do you think are there from that era?
So I don't know if I can go back that far. I do know that there are some photographs of campus before it was campus and when it was farmland. And when you look at those photographs, you see that this property had those eastern red cedars that are still on campus. And so the eastern red cedars in much of the places around campus are very old trees. Are they Civil War era? I'm not sure about that. Other really old trees. And from my knowledge, that probably the eastern red cedars are some of the oldest trees that are around. I mean, some of the really big trees around here, they just grow fast, right? The willow oaks around Double Drive, they were planted, I was told by Joni, they were planted in 1964, 1965. And so as trees go, they're not that old, but they're huge. There's a tulip tree that is close to Seekebeck, that is probably the largest tree on campus or close to it. That tree's not that old because tulip trees grow really fast.
The next question, can we use your maps as we walk around campus like an app?
Yes. Let's see. The easiest way to I think with some work I could get an app to people. Yes. The easiest way to do that is, and this is a little clunky, is simply to access that app on your cell phone from a browser. I know that browsers don't work as nicely as apps do, but you can see all the same information by using the browser and just going to the links that I can provide to folks.
Okay. Then Sylvia says, back in the 1960s, the cherry trees were so pretty on campus that they would attract the community. All right. Are there any other questions before we wrap up tonight? Okay, looks like there are none. So thank you, Dr. Griffith, for joining us this evening. I'd also like to thank Mark Simpkins from Events AV, who helped facilitate the virtual logistics of tonight's program. And thanks again to our viewers at home for joining us and being a part of the conversation. Remember that this presentation will be available for viewing on the UMW YouTube channel by this time next week. There you can watch this program and browse the full catalog of Mary Talks. Our 9th season of Mary Talks will conclude on April 16th and will feature Dr. Tracy Stonestreet, director of the UMW Galleries. Keep an eye out for more information for our next presentation. We look forward to seeing you then, if not earlier. Thank you and good night.